Hey, comic lovers, EMoney, the old man, and Thor, the dog of thunder, here on a brisk day here in Louisville, Kentucky.
It's a bit nippy.
Yeah. Hey, boy. Hey, boy. Thor's here 2 weeks in a row. That's been a record in recent memory, hasn't it? Yeah. All right, so today we are talking about the Bronze Age of comic books. It's a very interesting time for comics. A lot of new stuff going on, new heroes, new stories, and a lot of different...
It's a lot more to it than I thought before I started doing the research. A lot more.
What's the matter, boy? Do you want some of this? You want some of that, don't you? All right, kids, get ready to expand your horizons. This is Back Issues. All right, comic lovers, so before we get started today, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, give us a thumbs up, and if you like, leave us a comment. All right, old man, so the Bronze Age. How did this age of comic books get started?
Well, unlike the Golden Age, which everybody pretty much agrees started with Action #1, or the, Silver Age, which Amazing Fantasy 15 was the starting point. But the Bronze Age doesn't have a definitive starting point. But a lot of people, myself included, think that there was a couple things that started happening. First off, somewhere in 1970, Jack Kirby said goodbye to Marvel and jumped ship to DC Comics. Also, that's the era where the creative team started putting out more relevant storylines. Okay? Now, one of the major things, the part about Kirby leaving, it was mid to late 1970 that Kirby left, but before that, earlier that year, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams teamed up to do their first Batman story. And it was in Detective Comics number 395. And this was darker than what had previously been done. There was no Batman showing up in public, accepting the key to the city, or any of that crap.
Any of the Adam West stuff?
None of that garbage. But this title was called The Secret of the Waiting Graves. I've only read it once, and it's been a while. So, EMoney, add Detective Comics number 395 to our want list.
All right, it's on there.
We're going to Comic Book World tomorrow. This will be, well, today, I guess, is because you'll air it. Soon we're going to Comic Book World, and you need to look for that comic.
Okay.
All right. Now, a few months after the Detective Comics came out, DC added Green Arrow as a regular co-star to Green Lantern number 76. The creative team of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams started running relevant stories that became, just pretty much every one of them became an instant classic. Look at the Neil Adams cover of number 76 and tell me you don't feel like something important is going to happen in this one. All right, now let's go ahead and back it on up and let's talk about Jack the King Kirby.
Okay.
Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you know that the old man thinks Jack Kirby is probably one of the most important and talented comic book creators of all time. Dare I say the GOAT? Maybe. Now, imagine my shock when, as a young collector, one of the few comic book buddies that I had, another guy my age who collected comics, his name was Bobby McNeese, knew him for years. And he told me, I don't know how he found out because there was no internet, but he found out that Kirby had left Marvel.
Oh.
Now, this was your dog died kind of news. I mean, oh man. And it was years later that until I found out what happened. But here's what I believe happened. To this day, I believe these things are the cause. Jack wasn't happy about the limelight the Stan was getting when Jack felt he had contributed as much, if not more, to a lot of their iconic characters. He wasn't happy about some of the things that he felt like publisher Martin Goodman. Boy, you're probably going to tire point. You might as well put his picture on file.
Throw that picture up again.
All right. Martin Goodman had promised him things that Jack felt that Goodman didn't deliver. Jack wasn't happy about his lack of creative control. And he didn't like the fact that he wasn't getting credit for his character creation, co-creations, or even the story ideas, because a lot of the stories, the basic plots, were Jack's. And finally, Marvel came to him and wanted him to sign a contract that would prevent him from ever making any legal retaliations against the company. Kirby balked, so the Marvel executives stopped any negotiations on his new contract. Now, to be fair, Marvel was paying Jack, I think it was about $32,000 a year, which if you do the math from 1970 to 2021, that's about $200,000 a year by today's standards. So you got to believe that it wasn't all about the money, because he was making good money for his day. So I don't think that was the key issue. Now, he spent a couple of years negotiating a contract with DC. He finally signed it, and he was going to be working for editorial director Carmine Infantino. Google him. He's got some stuff under his belt. The contract was for 3 years with an additional 2-year option. Now, that's really all I could find on the contract. I don't know how much he signed for or what other stipulations there were, but he jumped ship. Now, right off the bat, you know he had more creative control. His first book for DC was Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, number 133. Now, they say the reason he chose that book to start out was because Jimmy Olsen didn't have any regular creative team on it, and Jack didn't want to come to DC and then start shoving people out of jobs.
Okay.
So that was a spot that he could jump into. And let's face it, pretty sure in that run he brought back the old Newsboy Legion, the Guardian. He did a lot of work with Jimmy Olsen, believe it or not. All right, so then he went on. Oh, his next issue, this is almost skipped one of the most important things he did. His next issue, Jimmy Olsen, number 134, he introduces Darkseid.
So, Darkseid shows up in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen.
He did.
Never would have been the title I would think he would choose for that character.
No. Well, check out this Neil Adams cover, though.
Okay.
All right, Kirby went on to create a trilogy of Fourth World comics. This includes New Gods, Mr. Miracle, and the Forever People. The New Gods pretty much laid out the universe. Forever People were some like young guys that were getting into trouble. And of course, I might have mentioned before that I always liked the Mr. Miracle character, partly because he might have been inspired when Jack Kirby saw Jim Strankle performing as an escape artist. How come you never asked me that kind of trivia?
You're not getting freebies.
What, have I told you that before?
Maybe once or twice.
Or 10 times. All right, so moving on. And it's early 1971. The U.S. government, or to be exact, the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, approaches Stan and Marvel Comics and says, can you guys do a really powerful anti-drug story for us? Well, at the time, the code didn't allow any mention of drug use. None. Zero tolerance. They would not put the stamp on any book that had that. So, Stan thought about it. And in my mind, he just said, the request came from the United States of America. Screw the censors. I'm going to publish what they wanted me to publish. And he did. Amazing Spider-Man numbers 96, 97, and 98 had the Green Goblin Reborn story arc. And it was the first Marvel comics to ever be published without the Comics Code stamp on the cover. And the dam was broken. So, Stan, you gotta love him. He figured he's gonna keep pushing the envelope when it comes to that code. So, here comes Conan the Barbarian featuring a near-naked warrior right out of the Robert E. Howard books. That opens the door for other barbarian characters. Marvel followed it up with Cole the Conqueror in 71, Red Sonja in 77. DC got on the bandwagon a little bit later with Beowulf in 75, and Warlord, Mike Grell's Warlord, in 1976. Well, since Stan's got the ball rolling, what the heck? He's got it going. The Comics Code is reeling. DC figures, now's the time. So they got them two guys that we talked about earlier to do a Green Lantern, Green Arrow story in numbers 85 and 86 that had Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy being addicted to heroin. Now those issues, just like the Amazing Spider-Man, hit the stands, were actually published without the code. Now that's one of your favorite books, didn't you do something with Neil Adams?
I did. I wrote a interview for Neil Adams on a news program I worked on, and I had them. One of the big topics we talked about was the drug story he did for DC Comics.
Didn't you also bring up a Louisville
connection? Yep. His Muhammad Ali versus Superman story. It was a perfect Louisville connection.
Yeah. There's a lot of neat trivia about that comic. You might want to look.
I wish I could find that interview. I've looked all over the internet. It's not out there anymore.
You also need a copy of that book.
Yep.
If you get a copy of it, we'll do an entire segment just on that book. Because that cover,
Yeah.
All right, so the code's on just reeling. They're just, oh my God, they're just hitting us from all different directions.
So they had to rethink their policy on drugs, right?
Well, not only drugs, but everything loosened up. The invitation to bring back horror creatures like werewolves, vampires, and other supernatural stuff had been issued. It's like, whatever. So DC Swamp Thing shows up in House of Secrets number 92 in 1971. Marvel comes out with Tomb of Dracula in early 72, and the Spirit of Vengeance, the Ghost Rider, debuts in Marvel Spotlight number 5 in mid-72. Soon after that, here comes Werewolf by Night in 71. Oh, I'm sorry, in 73. Now, they were going to do a book where the main character was Satan himself, but they got together in the little room where they get together in, and they talked it over, and they decided to tone it down a little bit, and the son of Satan shows up in Marvel Spotlight number 12. No,
okay.
I'm sorry, he showed up in Ghost Rider number 1, and then he got his own run starting in Marvel Spotlight number 12.
Okay.
And the Comics Code was on every one of these comics. Son of Satan.
Really?
Approved by the Comics Code.
Huh.
Go figure. Now, another important thing that happened in the Bronze Age, it started an era of racial diversity. Now, the Falcon showed up in mid-69, technically before the Bronze Age started, but in early 71, he got his name on Captain America, and the title became Captain America and the Falcon in Captain America number 134.
All right.
So that was a pretty major deal back in the day. And then, here's your own guy, Luke Cage, from the Netflix thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
Great show. All right, Luke Cage becomes the first black superhero to get his own title in 1972 with Hero for Hire number 1. All right, Tomb of Dracula number 10 was the first appearance of Blade in 73. Now, I'm hearing rumors that he's going to show up in the MCU.
I mean, with everything happening in the MCU right now, it's like anything's possible.
Well, I'm pretty sure they've already cast Blade, so it better happen.
Yep.
All right, Shang-Chi, and he's got a movie coming out. He was first seen in Marvel Special Edition number 15 in late 73, and then 2 issues later, they changed the title on the book to Master of Kung Fu, featuring Shang-Chi. All right, Misty Knight, also from Netflix. I think she was in Daredevil first. Maybe. At any rate, one of those shows.
Yep.
But in the comics, she was first mentioned in Marvel Premiere number 20, just mentioned though. Then she shows up in number 21 in late 74. Giant size X-Men number 1. You should do some special effect with that.
Okay.
At any rate, in early 75, this iconic book just introduced everybody, but so far as racial diversity, we're talking about Storm and Thunderbird.
Mm-hmm.
Monica Rambeau, but most of y'all heard that name. She made her debut in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16 in 1982. She was the next Captain Marvel. Then she became Photon and then Pulsar, and I think now she's called Spectrum. And that's right, fans of WandaVision, EMoney and the Old Man are paying attention. All right, so DC, they weren't ignoring this progress that was being made in comics. So Green Lantern 87 in late 1971 gave us the first black Green Lantern in John Stewart.
Okay.
Another great Neil Adams cover. In 1975, the Bronze Tiger shows up in Richard Dragon, Kung Fu Fighter. The Bronze Tiger, played by Michael J. White in Arrow.
Yep.
Perfect casting. Perfect.
Much better than his Spawn role, right?
Well, it was a horrible movie. But at any rate, Michael J. White, great actor, just saying. Now, the first minority DC character with their own title was Black Lightning #1. Yep, that Black Lightning in the Arrowverse, but that was in early 1977. DC Comics presents number 26 in the late 80s, late 1980, was not only the first appearance of the new Teen Titans, but the first time we get to see Victor Stone as Cyborg. And then Vixen, another character was in the Arrowverse, made her debut in Action Comics number 521 in mid-81. So, a lot of things happening there. But, you ready to change course?
Okay.
Let's change course.
All right.
Because you can't discuss the Bronze Age of comics without talking about the DC implosion.
DC implosion.
Right.
Oh.
Now, during the 70s, DC tried to play catch-up. Marvel was stomping them a new butthole. It just overwhelming them in its total sales numbers. Now, a lot of this was due to Marvel expanding their new book line and a bunch of reprint books. So, DC started to launch new titles also, and they started the DC Explosion. Okay? So, they brought in those Fourth World Jack Kirby stories. Steve Ditko started doing Shade the Changing Man and a bunch of other stuff. Then Jeanette Kahn took over running the company in '76. A year or two later, Kahn led the company in increasing the page count on a lot of comics and increasing the price tag on these comics. I think they went from 35 cents to 50 cents, something like that.
Okay.
I think a lot of them added a backstory, and we've already talked about how great backstories are. But the timing sucked. Because right about then, it's the winter of '77, '78. It was a terrible winter weather-wise.
Okay.
Terrible. The price of most materials used to print comics went through the roof. The price to ship those same materials went through the roof. And the profit margin in comic books went into the crapper. And it was horrible. I mean, and let's face it, during a real hard winter like that, kids weren't getting out to buy comics.
Right. Okay.
So basically the entire industry took it on the chin. Some companies like Charlton Comics went down the toilet. They didn't survive.
Okay.
Now, my understanding is DC cut a deal with them and they bought a lot of their characters, like The Question, Shade.
All right.
A lot of the Charlton, the Blue Beetle. And soon you'll be seeing John Cena's character, Peacemaker.
Okay.
All those guys got bought up by DC. All right. But unfortunately, around the time that was happening, DC had to cancel a lot of their titles and put the kibosh on a lot of stuff that was in progress. Thus, the DC implosion. Of all those titles that were canceled, a lot of them I didn't read, but it was really sad when they canceled Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth. That was an interesting title. It was kind of like Planet of the Apes kind of thing.
Right.
But I was sad when that got canceled. Now, believe it or not, they almost canceled Detective Comics. In fact, it was on the works. But the last second save came through, and they decided to merge the Batman family with Detective. So you could say they both survived, but they did in only one comic. So once the dust settled, it was all said and done, Marvel picked up 50% of the market at that time. And it was this time, and you asked me about this a week or two ago, you said, when did Stan Lee turn the reins over to somebody else? It's right about this time, Stan turned the reins over to Jim Shooter. Big, tall guy. At any rate, he handed the comic book division over to Jim, and Stan went to get involved in other projects like animation, TV, eventually the silver screen, which led to the MCU.
Like way down the road.
He never quit trying.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't going to be happy until the Marvel story was told on the big screen. And you know what the first one was?
The first movie at all?
The first silver screen Marvel movie.
Howard the Duck.
Got it. But at any rate, I'm not going to thank you for Howard the Duck, Stan, but thank you for getting us to where we are now.
Yeah.
Good job. Now I'm going to list off, and you're going to have to pop these comics up. Bam, bam.
Okay.
You ready? You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. A lot of stuff that happened in the Bronze Age was Amazing Spider-Man number 121, featuring the death of Gwen Stacy in mid-'73. Now, I think a year or so before that, her dad, Captain Stacy, had already been bumped off.
Right.
It got to a point where you didn't want to be somebody in a Spider-Man comic book. Wow. And speaking of Howard the Duck, in late 1973, he first showed up in Adventure in the Fear number 19. And he was hot as a pistol back then.
Really?
He soon got his own comic book, Howard the Duck number 1, a newspaper strip, the big screen movie we talked about in 1986, and he's had a couple of sneaky appearances in the MCU.
Yep. Did you know he was in the Battle for the Universe at the end of Endgame?
Seems like I've seen that.
When you watch it, when the heroes are coming through the portal and everything, when the Wasp shows up, she pops up, and if you look to screen right in that shot, you'll see Howard the Duck coming through the portal.
He's there.
Yep.
Don't know why he was there, but he was. All right, so moving on. In early '74, you had the iconic Punisher in Amazing Spider-Man number 129.
I want to add that issue to our desired comic books, but getting it is so far-fetched, I don't even want to put it on there.
Well, you might want to do one with reprint things.
Okay, I mean, just to read it, sure. For, collection value, eh.
Well, if you think that one's out of reach, this next one, the first appearance of Wolverine in Incredible Hulk number 181.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list. And the same thing with this next one. 1975, we got giant-size X-Men number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And a crap load of first appearances. We already talked about Storm and Thunderbird. You also had Nightcrawler. I think it was the first appearance of Colossus. Wolverine joins his team. It was a what do you call it? Slobber knocker.
It was slobber knocker.
Yeah. Now this book was drawn by Dave Cockrum, who actually did a signing day appearance at Comics America back in the day,
where he worked.
The store that I ran, and you want to talk about a great guy. He a collector.
Mm-hmm.
He was buying everything in the shop. It was a good day. All right, at any rate, also, the Star Wars comic started in 1977. It had a long run.
Yeah. I remember we had issue number 1 for a while there.
Yep.
Sold that for a nice profit.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah.
All right, so then a guy named Dave Sim started the independent title Cerebus about a barbarian aardvark. You heard me.
Yeah.
Aardvark. And this is late 77. And Dave was the longest running artist on the same comic book. He had a run of 300 issues.
Not a title you would think of to have a long running artist like that.
I mean, he created a character, so what the hell? Stayed on for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of independence, in early 78, Fantasy Quarterly, a comic that most of y'all have never heard of, never seen, never laid your hands on. But it featured the first appearance of ElfQuest by Wendy and Richard Penny. And it really wasn't a bad comic. I mean, it was about elves, and we're talking little elves, not the Tolkien 6-foot-something elves. It was the cutesy elves.
Okay.
Only they didn't act so cute. It was a pretty adult, violent type of book. I enjoyed it, at any rate. Early '82, Marvel publishes the Marvel Superhero Contest of Champions. This was the first miniseries. I remember thinking, a miniseries? What the hell? And it was a 3-issue book, and I remember just all kinds of people showed up in that. Guys I'd heard of, guys I hadn't. I forget the main character. The Game Master was competing against Death, something like that. But each big major deity had teams and stuff that they pit against each other. Mm-hmm. It was great. Loved it. Comico, another small company that I don't think is around anymore, they published a comic called Comico Primer in late 1982. Now this became a launching pad for a lot of new creators. It saw the beginning for Sam Keith and Matt Wagner.
All right.
And a bunch of other guys too. In mid-84, Marvel published their first big event. Now this storyline happened in Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. Yep. That's where our boy Venom got his start. Mm-hmm. You know, in Secret Wars, he was a costume. Later, it turned out that he was a living, sentient being.
Right.
So that's where he got started. Then in 1984, Mirage Studios, a company you've heard of, put out what the old man considers the first garage comic. In other words, they did it all in-house. They wrote it, they drew it, they inked it, they printed it, boxed them up, sold them out of one place. Whether it was a garage or not, really, I don't know. But at any rate. So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, #1 by Eastman and Laird. Now, this opened the door for a bazillion funny animal books with ridiculously long names. I mean, Preteen Dirty Gene Kung Fu Kangaroos. Adolescent something radioactive hamsters. I mean,
wasn't there some kind of a green alien rabbit or something?
Sure, I'm sure there was.
Okay.
I don't remember one, but I'm sure there was.
And you know, if you had one of those first printings of the early Ninja Turtles books, you were, yeah. I mean, you know, they were making them in house. They didn't print a lot of those.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, later on they had second, third, probably
Fifth,
fourth and
seventh.
fifth printings. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, having some of those early editions, that's sitting on some money there.
Yep. All right, so a lot of stuff happened in the Bronze Age. More than I was thinking about when I started working on this episode. But there was good and there was bad. Mm-hmm. But as bad as the bad things were, at least this era was never referred to as the Dark Age.
Oh.
Now, some people call the Copper Age the Dark Age.
Which is what we're going to be getting into next week.
Correct.
So, something to look forward to. All right, so that covers the Bronze Age. But first, before we sign off here, I have a special Bronze Age edition of Stump the Old Man.
Of course you do.
Right. All right, so let's head back out to the garage with Thor. All right, comic lovers, now we're on to our Stump the Old Man segment. And what do you know, I have a special Bronze Age Stump the Old Man segment here for you today.
You got a Thor question this week, don't you?
I do have a Thor question as well.
Knew it. I should have kept my mouth shut last
See
week.
Thor?
You wouldn't have noticed.
See, Thor? Mm-hmm. I included you this time. All right, so for a 2 out of 3 to win, let's get into it. First question. During the Bronze Age, a Fantastic Four cartoon show aired on television, but was absent the Human Torch. Johnny Storm had been replaced by a know-it-all robot with a largely negative response from viewers. Name that robot.
Oh, they hated him. I mean, how are you going to replace Johnny Storm with the stupid floating robot? And the robot's stupid name was Herbie.
That is correct.
Now, don't ask me what Herbie stood for.
Herbie stood for Humanoid Experimental Robot, B-Type Integrated Electronics. So somebody really wanted it to come out to Herbie.
Yeah, they picked Herbie before they picked what it stood for. You
Yeah.
can tell. That's silly.
It's largely believed by people that the Human Torch was left out of the show because viewers feared that stupid kids would light themselves on fire to emulate their favorite hero.
It's not true?
Not true.
That's what I thought the reason was.
Actually, the Human Torch was owned by Universal at the time, as the character was being considered for a live-action TV show.
So they owned the Human Torch, but not the rest of the team.
Right. They wanted to give him a live-action show, much in the same style of The Incredible Hulk. But nothing ever came of it, and the ownership eventually went back to Marvel.
Well, yeah, they would have given you 10 seconds of him torching.
Yeah.
Just like they did in that first ridiculous, terrible movie that went straight to video.
Mm-hmm. All right, so 1 for 1. Question number 2. We have our Thor question. There's our Thor question.
I better get this one.
A plot that has been mostly abandoned in the modern age, what is responsible for Thor's immortality?
Hey. It's not personal. It's not personal. It's not personal.
It's all right, boy.
Sit.
It's all right.
Sit. It's all good. Thor's ready to go find Loki and tell him a new one. Hey, here you go.
Hey, Thor.
Now,
you're right.
You were asking me where Thor gets his immortal powers.
Yep.
Just so happens, I think there was that tree, which I don't know the name of the tree, but he ate the apples from the tree, and that gave him immortality.
That is correct. Like all Asgardians, Thor is incredibly long-lived and relies upon periodic consumption of the golden apples of Adun, I think is how it's pronounced.
I never remember the name of the
tree. To
tree.
sustain his extended lifespan, which to date has lasted many millennia. So, again, the old man is 2 for 2. So
win again.
Yep. So
let's do one for funsies.
Yeah, just for fun. All right, number 3. What Bronze Age comic book reportedly sold for $150,000, the largest amount ever paid for a Bronze Age comic?
Well, I can only think of 3 comic books that might have brought that kind of money. Amazing Spider-Man 129 that I mentioned in the earlier first appearance of Punisher. Where are you going? I don't think the Death of Gwen Stacy. I'm not considering that one of my 3. There was the first Wolverine and Incredible Hulk 181. And then the one that I'm going to say is my answer, Giant Size X-Men #1.
That is incorrect. Incredible Hulk number 181. First full appearance of Wolverine.
I gotta stop guessing.
The issue sold with a CGC rating of 9.9.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Ooh, that's huge.
Just for some perspective, other issues of 181 have sold with a CGC rating of 9.8 for $50,000. So that 0.1 gets you an extra $100,000.
If you keep dropping your stuff, you have to go digging. Here, just take this one. We'll get that one later. There you go.
All right, so 2 out of 3, the old man wins this round.
I got the Thor question.
All right, comic lovers, that about does it for this episode. But before we go, a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week. And next week, we are continuing our series on the history of comic books with the Copper Age. Now, this gets closer and closer, inching ever forward to the modern age of comic books. This is stuff I'm a little more familiar with, something that happened in my lifetime or close enough to it. And it's an exciting time, isn't it, Thor? Huh? Did you need this to...
Who taught him to be such a smart aleck?
Right?
Man.
All right, so tune in next week for the Copper Age, and Thor will be back with us again. We'll see you guys then. Excelsior.
True believers, see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And I hate that show. But anyway.